Well, let me just say that you're very, very welcome here in Downing Street, and as you heard from the cheers of the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom, and we stand with you in Ukraine for as long as it may take.
In this meeting held in March of this year, Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, promised Zelensky that Ukraine would have the full support of the United Kingdom.
And our absolute determination to stand with you, unwavering determination.
That day, Zelensky arrived in London, right after a disastrous meeting with Trump at the White House.
God bless you. You won't have to work. Don't tell us how we'll feel. We're solving a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. You're
in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
He needed allies, guarantees of real support, and Starmer delivered. The British offered a loan of more than 2 billion euros to Ukraine. But Starmer omitted that the United Kingdom was planning a much stronger response to Russia. And just a few months later, in July, these plans became reality. The United Kingdom and European Union launched the most coordinated and severe economic attack Russia has ever faced. No soldiers or weapons were sent to Ukraine. It was a completely different war, fought in the shadows of the oceans. To understand how this silent attack can change the course of the war, you need to know Putin's best-kept secret. Imagine a moment, more than 1,000 oil tankers scattered across the world's oceans, old ships flying the flags of countries you've probably never heard of. Ships vanish from radar for days. Ships that change their names like changing clothes, that transfer oil in the middle of the ocean, far from any oversight. This is Russia's ghost fleet. It has become the real lifeline that keeps Putin's war machine running. When Western sanctions started to tighten in 2022, Russia faced a huge problem: how to keep selling oil when the world's major shipping and insurance companies were banned from working with them. The solution they came up with for this problem was simple. They created a shadow fleet of ships. Russia took hundreds of old oil tankers, many ironically sold by European companies, and turned them into a scheme to evade sanctions. These ships are between 15 and 25 years old. They're old enough to go unnoticed, but still functional enough to complete the long journeys from Russia to Asia. Here's a detail that makes all the difference. These Russian ships don't sail under the Russian flag. They register using the flags of countries with little oversight. Gabon, an African country nobody's heard of, has become the favorite. A Russian oil tanker, then, can be re-registered as Gabonese and get a new name that sounds appropriately African, and receive fake documentation that makes it almost impossible to trace its true origin. At sea, these ships use every imaginable tactic to hide themselves. They turn off their automatic identification systems, the maritime equivalent of turning off your phone's global positioning system. They remain invisible for days or weeks. When they reappear, it's in international waters, where they transfer oil from ship to ship. Suddenly, Russian oil becomes Gabonese oil. In the documents, the insurance system is also a very well-set trap. Since legitimate Western insurance companies can't cover these operations, Russia created its own black market for insurance. Russian companies and even landlocked countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan have magically become major maritime insurers. Overnight, the coverage is minimal and often useless, but it provides the necessary paperwork to fool less strict port authorities. This fleet represents something impressive. Approximately 17% of all global maritime oil transport. You need to conduct 17% of global trade illegally. It shows how reliant you've become on this operation. But in July 2025, that dependence turned against Russia itself. The attack, coordinated by the United Kingdom and European Union, was unprecedented. It wasn't just about adding more ships to the sanctions list, it was a fundamental change in the rules of the game. The European Union introduced something revolutionary, a dynamic price cap for Russian oil. Before, the cap was fixed at $60 per barrel. Now, the price adjusts automatically every 6 months, always staying at least 15% below the average market price. In September, the cap dropped to $47.60 per barrel. This created what analysts call a price death spiral. Here's why this is devastating. Is Russia trying to circumvent the cap through complex deals, or is it being forced to give even bigger discounts to Asian buyers? The European Union's cap automatically adjusts downward. It's as if the system learns and adapts. With every attempt by Russia to escape, the United Kingdom went even further. Instead of just targeting the ships, they attacked the companies that make the whole system work. Intershipping Services, a company responsible for registering Ghost Fleet ships under the flag of Gabon, was cut off from the Western financial system. A single company facilitated up to $10 billion a year in Russian trade. The message was clear. It doesn't matter where you hide, we will find you. Another factor that greatly harms Russia is the timing of this attack. That's because the sanctions hit exactly when Russia was entering the peak season for transporting winter fuel to Asia. 444 ships were affected by the sanctions, forcing them to take much longer routes or even become unable to operate normally. To understand why these sanctions are so effective, you need to look at the numbers behind the Russian operation. Historically, oil and gas revenues accounted for between 30% and 50% of Russia's federal revenue, generating more than $100 billion annually in the good years. When the sanctions began, revenues plummeted and costs increased significantly. To give you an idea, transporting Russian oil to Asia instead of Europe adds $10 to $15 per barrel in transportation costs. Asians, knowing the risks and extra costs, demand heavy discounts. The transportation time from Russia to India takes approximately a month, much longer than just a few days to European destinations. An additional dollar of cost per barrel translates into $5 million in daily lost revenue for Russia, based on its export volumes of approximately 5 million barrels per day. These expenses, which only increase, represent a constant drain on Russian war funds, and the impact of this is appearing in the place that matters most. In the pocket, the 2025 budget reveals a country in total survival mode. Military spending consumes about a third of the federal budget, approximately $142 billion. Combined with national security and law enforcement, defense spending accounts for more than 40% of all federal expenses. It's a level of militarization of the economy that's unprecedented in history. The economy is being structurally deformed, optimized only for military production. To give you an idea, investment in infrastructure has practically collapsed when it's outside the defense sector. Education and healthcare systems are facing severe budget cuts. And here's a detail that reveals the desperate situation. Russia's unemployment rate has dropped to just 2.3%, a record low since 1991. That might sound good on paper, but in reality it means they're having huge difficulties hiring people. They're competing for an ever-shrinking pool of workers, especially as Russia keeps calling men into the army and middle-class families flee the country. Well, economics. He imagined that, on the other side, a technological war was being prepared specifically against him. This is perhaps the most impressive part of this whole story. Imagine the following. Russia is using every possible trick to hide these ships. They turn off the global positioning system, change their names, and transfer oil in the middle of the ocean. But on the other side, the United Kingdom and Europe are using technology that seems straight out of a science fiction movie to find each one of these ships. The West's secret weapon, artificial intelligence. There are companies that have created computer systems capable of analyzing thousands of pieces of information at the same time to find out where each ship is and what it's doing. And the way they work is fascinating. First of all, they analyze satellite photos. But that's not all. They can detect the heat that ships produce, the waves they make in the water, and even when a ship is lying about where it is. If a Russian ship says it's in one place, but the data shows that's impossible, the computer catches it right away. The United Kingdom created an operation called Nordic Warden, which uses this artificial intelligence to monitor 22 important areas in the seas of Europe. The system gives a risk score to each ship that passes by. If a ship seems suspicious, it automatically triggers an alert for several countries. At the same time, Russians are trying to adapt in increasingly desperate ways. Some ships now carry several fake global positioning system devices at the same time. Others use technology to send false information about their location. The most sophisticated ones can even swap identities with other ships while at sea. But this ends up creating a big problem for Russia. Every time they try to lie, they end up leaving more clues for computers to find. It's like trying to erase your footprints in the sand, but making more tracks instead. Artificial intelligence can compare information from several different satellites and figure out when someone is lying. Technology is beating lies. And this is creating a huge headache for Putin, because with all this technological pressure, Russia also lost its main clients when the sanctions started. Europe stopped buying Russian oil. Now the main buyers are China and India, who remain neutral and profited by buying Russian oil at a discount. But July changed things. For the first time, Europe didn't just target Russia, but also those who help Russia. An Indian refinery controlled by a Russian company was sanctioned. Chinese banks that facilitated Russian payments were also punished. The message was clear. If you want to help Russia, you will also pay the price. With that, costs are quickly piling up for Russia. The price cap, which adjusts automatically, is especially effective. Every time Russia tries to charge more for oil, the cap automatically goes down. It's like a trap that keeps closing tighter and tighter. The British government estimates that Russia's oil and gas revenues have fallen by more than a third since 2022. In May 2025, Russia's oil revenues reached only $12.6 billion. Almost the worst result since the invasion. A cascading and devastating effect, by the way. Russia is being forced to spend more and more money just to keep the system running, and the system is already inefficient by nature. The question is no longer if these sanctions will work, but how quickly they will. And in that sense, the outlook for the shadow fleet is not good. Detection technology is getting better and better, the ships are getting older and more problematic, and the costs keep rising. If the costs to keep the fleet running become higher than the profit from the oil sold, the whole system will collapse. As you can see, for the first time since the beginning of the war, Putin is feeling the pressure exactly where it hurts the most, in his wallet. Maybe this is the most powerful weapon that Starmer had in mind when he promised full support to Ukraine at that meeting in March. This pressure, well, it seems to be just beginning. Now I want to know your opinion. Which aspect of this silent war against the Ghost Fleet impressed you the most? Leave your answer in the comments. If you found this content useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video. See you next time.